This is Gemara Baba Basra, Daf Mem Ches, and we're holding on. Mem Ches and Aleph, we are 3 lines from the top. We just finished trying to explain the Shita of Rav Huna that said, Tolu of Izavin Zvina Zvini on the bottom of Mem Zayin Amid Beis, 4 lines from the bottom. And we were trying to figure out why. If you force someone to sell something, why is it considered a good sale? On the top of Mem Chesam and Aleph, we quoted the very famous Gemara that when it comes to Karbanos, Yakriv Isai, you force someone. How do you force someone to bring a carbon? There needs to be Ratzain, Kaifin Isai, Ad Sheyayma Raitzani. You force him until he says he wants. Ask the Gemara 3 lines from the top of Damashani Asam. Maybe that case is different. Maybe when it comes to a carbon only, one wants to get a kapara. And that's the reason why when he eventually acquiesces and he says, you're right, I want it, that's when we say that he has a leiv shalim, because he wants the end result, which is the kapara. So how could that be a raya to Ravuna? To Ravuna's case, where it's obviously it's not a kapara, it's just salu of his oven. It says the Gemara ve'elami seifa. Let's go look at the seifa of that brisa. The brisa first discusses a carbon, and then the brisa continues 5 lines down that the same thing is found by a get isha. That what kaifin isai, we force him until he says right. We force him to give a get until he says that he wants to give it. Midaitai mashma. Says we're 1 second. But Del Mashani also, maybe over there it's different as well. Dimitra Lishmaya Divrei Chachamim. As Rashban points out 10 lines in. Maybe over there when he says Reitzani, he has a Gemar Das to divorce his wife because he's doing a mitzvah. Because once Chazal or Mechuyavim, as the previous Rashi is quoted the Gemara Ksubis, we're talking about cases where he has to divorce her. So maybe only in those cases do we say that even though it's forced, but there's Ratzon. But how could that bring a raya to our case of Tulu of his oven? Says the Gemara Elasvarahu, Agav Unse Gomaru Makni. Says the Gemara, it's a svara. It's a svara that because of the oines, because of the duress, he decides to give over the item. He's Gomar Beliba Yumakni because Lemais is Matan Mois. He's not losing anything, so he gives over the item. Masiv Rav Yehuda, ask Rav Yehuda 1 second. Get a Musa Israel kosher. If there's a coerced get by Bezdin, by Yidin, then it's kosher when the husband says Reitzani. Uba'akum pasal. Uba'akum chayvtin aisai v'aymer lo yasei mashi Yisrael. If by Goyim, Uba'akum it's pasal. And if the Bezdin wants to employ Goyim as agents of the Bezdin, chayvtin aisai, they can hit him v'aymer lo, and they could say to him, Asay Mashi Yisrael Aymer Lecha, do as the Yidden tell you to do, meaning follow Bezdin. Then the get is a good get. Ask the Gemara Mayos Anami Nema I won't say Gemara Megarish. Maybe he's under duress, and that's why he's doing it. But the problem is that there's no chiyuv in this case, so maybe it's just because of the duress he's giving in. So ask the Gemara, why in this case is the get not a good get? It's an uba'akum, it's no good. Why? Why don't we say, just like in our case, you chayv tinaisai ad shayma reitzani, and when he says reitzani, we assume it's done with full ratzain. So say the same thing over there by the get. Says the Gemara, Itmar Allah, smack in the middle of the Amr, the first line is Itmar. Amar Amisharshia Dvar Toira Midaraisa Afilu Ba'akum Kosher. You're right. Be'etzem, if a guy were to force and say, do like the Yidden tell you to do, it would be a good get. Just like by us, the Lu of his Zavin, when he finally acquiesces, when he finally gives in, it's a good sale. Umatam omru ba'akum puzzle. So if that's true, why lamaisa do we just say if a get is forced by goyim it's puzzle? Kidei shaloite kolachas va'achas oileches v'toila atzma biyad akum. We don't want every person to go and literally hang themselves and force themselves onto the goyim of kas atzma biyad baila. Meaning it's a technical detail. Be'etzem, if a guy were to force her to give a get, and he would say, right, Sani, we would say it's a good get. The problem is, for the sake of society, we're worried. We're worried that if one is able to get out of a get in such a mannerism, we're worried that a woman will want to get divorced and she'll go and hire a hitman who will beat up her husband till he says, right, Sani, and that's the reason why we said if it's done by Goyim, it is not a good get. Masiv Rav Hamnuna, about 15 lines from the bottom. First one line is Lokach. We saw in a Mishnah prior to Mishnah and Gittin. Lokach meisik urikon v'chazav lokach mibela bayis. Someone buys a piece of property from the Sikrikin, the extortionists, those who took away land by force. And then when he bought it from the Baal Bayis, Mechai Batal. Ask the Gemara, why is Mechai Batal? Vamai, Osam Nami, why don't we say, Nema Agav Unsei, Gamaru Makni, that when these guys come to take it away, why don't we say Lamaisa was under duress, but he gave in. So if you buy it from them afterwards, why are we saying it's not a good sale? Explains the Gemara, Itmar Allah, Merav Loishanu Allah. As we already explained, Avol bishtar, you're right. If there was an actual proper shtar, then it would be an actual kinyan. Ask the Gemara L'Shmuel, Damarav bishtar nami loikana. According to Shmuel, that says that even if there is a shtar, there's no kinyan. Michael and Meimar says the Gemara Moide Shmuel, Heicha diyahiv Zuzi. Shmuel admits in the case where he gave money to the owner, then it is a good sale. So if the case of the Sikrikin is similar to our case of Rav Huna, similar to our case of Tluav Izavin, then it would indeed be a good sale by the Sikrikun. Like by Rav Huna, Tluav Izavin is a good sale. Says the Gemara, Ravibi Dimasayim Ba Mishveder Rav Nachman, Karka Ein Loi Mois Yeshloi. According to Ravibi, that said in the case of Sikrikon, Lamaisa, you could get your money back. So says the Gemara, which is clearly not like Rav Huna, because he says that even in the case of Mois, it's not a good sale by Sikrikon. So why by ours, in the case of Tluav Izavin, is Rav Huna asking it is a good sale? Michael and Meimar, says the Gemara, what are you going to say? Ravibi Meimra. Michael and Meimar, excuse me. Ravibi Meimrahu, Umemra Rav Huna loi sfira lei. Says the Gemara, you're right. It comes out that Ravibi is not like Rav Huna. Okay. Ravibi Meimrahu. Ravibi is quoting Amarayim. Rav Nachman could argue. But it's not, excuse me, Rav Huna could argue, remember Rav Huna lo yisfira lei, but that's not going to be a kasha. Omar Rava, Paskin Zayis Rava, 2 lines from the bottom. Hilchasa, Tluav Izavin, Zvina Zvini, like Rav Huna said. But qualifies Rava on the last lines of words of Memchesam and Aleph. V'loya Amaron, we only say this, Elo. As we turn over to Memches Amid Beis, we only say this by a field when there's a situation of Tluav Izavin Bisadeh Stam. Avol Bisadeh Zu Loi, then it wouldn't be a good field. Ubisadeh Zu Nami Loi Amaron. Alotolo Artzi Zuzi, Avol Artzi Zuzi. But if he counted the money, then Loi, then the sale is not void. And this is only in a scenario in which the owner had no way to evade. But if the owner had a way to somehow wiggle out of the story and not have to give away his karka, then the sale would not be void. It says the Gemara before we get to Velchasa. Let's just look at the top Rashbam. The top Rashbam points out that someone forces to sell achas misadaisa v'loi birer me'atzmai u'machar ezois tekivon de meidaite birer ra shebehen birer she'enoi chayshish ba kol kach l'gamar amakni. If you force him to sell a field and then the Bailim went and chose this field, even though he might not have been happy, that's a clear indication that he actually gave it over. But said the Gemara, but if they forced to sell a particular field, then it wouldn't be good. But says the Gemara, but it's only Dulartis Kabel, Lomana Mois, Kilo Daitoi Deval Karchai Mekabel. The Hilchasa, back into the Gemara. What is Lamaisa the Halacha? 4 lines down, Paskins the Gemara Nachamol, Bekulu dahave zvini zvini, vafilu b'sadazu, even in a case of sadazu, lemaisa, and a case of larts, he's using the Rashbam points out, he didn't count the money, v'lav leilish tamute, davi oines gomor, but still, it's going to be a good sale. Says the Gemara, how do we know this? Da'isha kisadezu damya, because a woman, when she's forced into marriage, is similar to the case of sadezu, and yet V'amar Meimar teaches Ameir Mar Tulu Kaddish Kedushin. So we see that a coerced, a forced, a pushed sale is a good sale. It's a good marriage. So too by us, even in the case of sadezu, even in the case of not Artzu Kamei. He did not count the money, still a Maisa going to be a good sale. That is how the Gemara Paskins. This is based on the din of a Meimar, that Tulu of Kaddish, Kedushin. Says the Gemara, but in reality, Mar Bar Rav Ashi Amar, he argues. Be'isha vadai kedushin lo yahave. In the case of a woman who's forced to get married, it's definitely not a marriage. Why? Hu asa shaloika haigen lefikach asa imai shaloika haigen. Says the Gemara, even if she theoretically does acquiesce and she does show ratzon, it's not going to be a good kedushin. How? Vafkenu Rabbana the Kedusha Minei. Chazal are going to come along and say we can't let this guy who's forcing this woman to get married, and even if at some level under duress she agrees, says the Gemara, no. Afkinu Rabbana the Kedusha Minei. Chazal come along and say it is not a good marriage. Amar le Ravina le Rav Ashi famously Teinach the Kaddish Bekasa. Kasba, if the marriage was done with money, I understand. Chazal have the power to be mafkir, to make ownerless someone else's money. But says the Gemara, but if the act of marriage, of betrothal was done via bia, what are you going to say? Amar le, shavinu rabbana lebilas, bilas zino, so much so, Chazal don't want this marriage to go through. They'll even create that his act of Abiyah was an act of zinos, and therefore it will not effect a marriage. Says the Gemara, Tabi, that is someone's name. Tala lepapi akinra. Tabi hung papi on a kinra tree, vizavin, until he sold him what he asked. Chasim Rabbi Rav Chana. Rabbi Rav Chana signed Amoidah, the notification, Vashaklata, as well as the document of sale. The Rabbi Chana signed 2 different documents. One of them was on the actual sale, and one of them was on the Maidah saying that this whole sale was forced, which means these 2 stories, of course, really contradict each other. Omer Ravuna, man de chasem ha-Maidah, shabir chasim. Says Ravuna, the one who signed in the Maidah is good. It gives the document power, and therefore it will be mevatel this for sale. And the one that's signed on the property is also a good sale. Says the Gemara, what does Rav Huna mean? He just said that both signatures are good, but these two documents contradict each other. Says the Gemara, Manashach. So what exactly does the Gemara mean? So Hachi Kamar, says the Gemara, 4 lines to the bottom, Ilav Maida. If not for the Maida, signing on the document would be a good signatures. Why? Because Taluav Izavin is Lamaisa, good sale, unless there's a document otherwise. Ravuna Lataime, Dama Ravuna Taluav Izavin, Zvina Zvini. So says the Gemara, yes, these two things could go hand in hand. Ba'atzem, the sale on its own is a good sale. We said signing on Maida is good. Signing on Maida will counteract the sale. Says the Gemara, Eini, is this true of Amar Rav Nachman, Eidim Sha'amru Amana Hayadavarenu? Asked the Gemara, if Eidim came along, they signed the document, and then they said that which we signed was just Amana, was just on trust, wasn't really a good document. So we turn over to Memtesam and Aleph, Einem Anim, Maida Hayadavarenu, Einem Anim. So how can you tell me that Rav Huna is learning that the second document, the Shtar Maida, that was signed, undoes the original signatures? Seemingly the Brisa says not that way. Answers the Gemara, the obvious teretz, Hani Mili al Peh, Tlasi al Peh, Omar Lishtara. That's only if it was done al Peh, if they're coming along and saying the Edom are giving eidos, that it was Be'amana, then it doesn't work. Havel Bishtara, Asi Ishtara, Umara Lishtara. One star can come along and make the other star null. That's what Rav Huna meant, that the star showing that it's a Maida will undo the other star. Pick it up from here, B'siyata Dishmaya.